So if you're like me, you're addicted to season-long fantasy sports, but you want to learn how to win big in DFS. No worries. In this episode, I will be connecting with my man, Nolan Dykes from OddsJam, and he's going to walk us through OddsJam and show us how to win big at daily fantasy. So let's go ahead and get my main man in here and let's get it cooking. All right.
Hey, Robin. How
How
you
you
doing,
doing,
man?
sir?
Good. Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah. I know when you normally do these calls, it's not like this. We going big over here.
Nah, no, definitely not. Definitely not, man. But it's exciting. First time. So it should be good. Should be good. I'm excited.
Good stuff. So we're gonna pull up the OddsJam application in a minute, but before we start, just kind of give me a primer, especially of a person who's coming from season-long fantasy, trying to learn about DFS. Tell me how OddsJam could help a person like me.
Yeah, definitely. So just before I get into that, a little background on myself, actually. So I'm from California. So like you, kind of, I don't have access to those traditional books, like DraftKings, Caesars, FanDuel, that sort of thing. So I do rely, as well on Prize Picks, Underdog Fantasy, all those fantasy, daily fantasy sites that, a lot of your audience relies on too. That's kind of what I do as well. So for me, getting season long, you're focused on a draft, and then a kind of a week by week basis. You can see what players are good, what are bad, if you want to trade, that sort of thing. With OddsJam, what we focus on is week by week, right? So what you'll do with, for example, Prize Picks and Underdog Fantasy, or any of these platforms for that matter, is what you'll do is you'll create a lineup for that given week, right? Just like what you would do in a season long. You have your lineup already set, and then you would start your players. You would bench who you want, that sort of thing. With our kind of system and strategy, what we do is we find profitable plays long term, week by week. So if you can scroll over to the fantasy optimizer on our site and let me know when you have that open.
Cool. So the fantasy optimizer is down here. Let me
Yep.
close
So if you
this.
scroll
Fantasy
down a little,
tools, fantasy optimizer. Very
perfect.
nice.
Great. So actually, we do. We're starting to get some NFL and some college football in, which is always good to see. It's always an exciting time of year, right? NFL coming back, NBA and NHL. So what you can see right here is we tried to make this optimizer as simplistic as possible for really, the average sports fan or somebody who's not into sports at all to be able to read and access. And so we can kind of take it left to right. What you're going to see up top at the very top is all the platforms that we support on the Fantasy Optimizer. So these are all outside of, I believe, Fliff and okay, yeah, outside of Fliff, they are all fantasy platforms, meaning you need two or more picks uh, in your slip, quote unquote, to create an entry. Fliff is used as a traditional sports book, but we have that on here as well, just for kind of added what's the word? Just for added clarity. If somebody wants it, they have that additional option. So I guess we could start with Prize Picks. Mainly the fact that Prize Picks is kind of, at least out of these sites, one of the bigger platforms, I would say. So what we're going to have down here is, if you scroll down, you see the Prize Picks, and I don't know how in depth you want me to get on everything. Um,
You can go all the way in because for
okay.
me, I've done some DFS on Underdog Fantasy,
Yep.
Owner's Box, and even a little bit of Prize Picks, but I just haven't been really good. I've
Okay.
just been
Yeah.
throwing money away. So for me, you can just kind of give me a breakdown so I could get started and win big.
Yep. No worries. So yeah, perfect. So if you go to the top there where it says Prize Man 6-man flex minus 119. So perfect. So I think what in order to kind of be successful at this at the start, what people should understand is these fantasy platforms, they all have fixed payouts, right? So, whether you select over or under on any player, they're all going to have a certain payout for that slip that's already implied in the odds given, right? So, for example, if I do a two-man power play on Prize Picks at minus 136, uh, oh, perfect. So, and then if you scroll down, to the point where you see yellow and red? Oh, perfect. Okay, so what that means, right? So minus one, I believe it's minus 137, is a two-man prize picks. So what we're thinking about is break even numbers, right? So for prize picks, for example, in this selection on a two-man power play, you need to be above that I believe that's 57.55, no, excuse me, 58% is the break even rate on prize picks to be profitable long term on a two-man power play. So a power play, both your players need to hit in order for you to win that slip. There is no, if I hit half my slip, I get money back. It's two or nothing at all. So that's what we're looking at simplistically for this site, for any of the fantasy platforms, is our break-even number, and then anything above that is going to be, of course, shown in green, and that's what we're after,
Quick
right? So,
question. I
yeah,
got a quick question. So, just for clarity, right here on this tab, when I do like a two-man power play, that's me doing the over or under or the higher and lower, which they say on Underdog Fantasy, for
yep,
example, like for those two players only. But if I wanted to do three players, then I would click this, and then the odds would change based on the amount of players on the slip, correct?
correct. Yeah, exactly. So the odds will change based on, or the implied odds will change based on the number of players selected in the slip. So yeah, for instance, if I'm looking to build a three-man slip, I would go over, prize picks, three-man flex, to get the correct associated implied odds per leg. Um,
Got it. Another
so
quick question
yeah,
before we move on. I see here that we have the OddsJam logo, we have the Prize Picks logo, we have the Underdog logo. What is the relevance here of having these three columns, and how does that relate to the slip?
yeah, definitely. So that's really for comparison in a way, right? Um, Obviously, for example, we'll start left to right. So the OddsJam algo line, that's from our algorithm, that's the fair price, I guess you could call it, of what we give that line to be, right? For instance, I won't do the Dak Prescott line because that's just over half a passing yard. But if we go to, I don't know, the under that second play up, the second play, under 254 and a half passing yards, we give it, based on price picks line, right, of 254 minus 527.89 odds, essentially, right? Now, what you'll see on the second column is going to be price picks implied odd per that, for that slip, or excuse me, for that leg. And since we have a three-man flex open, that's, they're all going to be minus 144 down the line. And then the comparison part of it is we have Underdog Fantasy, and they have his exact line. I don't know the player exactly, but his line on Underdog Fantasy is going to be or excuse me, 232 and a half passing yards. Um, so really, we have multiple options, and I'm not sure if you can scroll further right, um, if that's possible.
It's
Like,
I might
okay,
have
you
to
see,
just.
there was sports battle.
There we go.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, I mean, all of those. We do have a couple, traditional sports books: FanDuel, Caesars, DraftKings, and BetMGM available. Um, but really, all we're looking for that is just a couple points of comparison, right? A couple data points to compare the line we're getting on Prize Picks, right? The implied odds that we're getting on Prize Picks compared to those of other sports books and fantasy sites. And that's of course how we can obviously tell that it would be a profitable play or a not profitable long-term play. Um, so now the kind of the key with these slips, at least for my from my understanding and how I personally deal with this, because this is how I personally make money, right? Is I'm on 7 of these fantasy sites. This tool, from a personal standpoint, I use 99% of the time. So what I'll usually do is I'll start off going from top to bottom, right? I'll create a slip. And again, too, this goes back to, yep, the implied odds, right? On any fantasy platform I'm on Prize Picks, for example, I know just off the top of my head, the best implied odds will be a 5 and a 6-man flex play. So what that means with flex compared to power on Prize Picks specifically is that a flex play you can lose for example, in a 5-man flex play, you can hit 3 of your 5 guys. You get point 0.4 back of your money. So a $10 entry would win you $4 back. You would lose 6 in total. A 4 out of 5, right? You hit 4 out of your 5 players, that would get 2x your money. So 10 would get you 20 in return, in total. And then a 5x would get you 10x your money. Excuse me, a 5 out of 5 will get you 10x your money. So a $10 entry would return you 100 in total. And that's going to be the case for all these platforms, right? We're looking for the lowest implied odd per leg on every platform, and they're all somewhat different. So keep that in mind too when you're scrolling between, Prize Picks or Underdog or Parlay Play, all a little bit different. So always be aware of the selection that you have in the top left corner, and make sure that the amount of players that you're building in your slip correlates to that number, whether it be a 5-man or a 4-man or whatever the case may be.
Very nice. I have a quick question. So
Yeah,
I am an underdog fantasy guy. So that's where I spend most of my time with
sure.
daily fantasy. Would you say that that same technique of the 5-man insured or 5-man flex would be the best odds?
Yeah, so with Underdog Fan, and that's why we always suggest having multiple platforms available for you, right? Because I don't know if you saw on the right hand side, all of those, right? We're comparing odds, right? So if we have multiple books, say I have Prize Picks, Underdog, and Parlay Play, right? Prize Picks may not have a line that Underdog has. Vice versa, Parlay Play might have a line that Underdog doesn't have. So that's the point of having multiple books would be, hey, I'm getting the best implied odd per leg, right? And I have multiple books, so I have the ability to do so, and I'm not losing out on any value that I don't need to be losing out on, right? Um, so, sorry, what was your question there?
The question was for underdog fantasy specifically, the
Yep.
implied odds for the 5-man flex or the 5-man insured. Would that be the same strategy? Would you suggest that for underdog as prize picks, or is that across all of the books?
Correct. Yeah. So we're looking for each individual platform. We're always looking for the lowest implied odd per leg. So yeah, the same rules would apply with Underdog Fantasy. If you click the drop down button there with the -120, um, it'll have the same layout as it did with Prize Picks, right? So you can see, kind of go through the motions. Non-insured would just mean essentially a power for Prize Picks. They have different terminology, but overall the same thing. And with Prize Picks, for those who are interested, the optimal legs would be just off the top, a 3-man non-insured, a 4-man insured, and then for a 5-man, it really doesn't matter. You can kind of, since it is 5 legs, and it's more challenging to hit. Um, you can insure it, or you can let it ride 5 out of 5 and you win. Of course, you do win a little more if you hit your full 5 out of 5 and it is insured. But if it's not and you don't, it's a total loss. So, um, yeah, I
Okay.
mean, the strategy in specifically picking players, right? I get that a lot of like, okay, I'm on this page. How do I, regardless of what platform, how do I go about picking players and building a slip? And in all honesty, again, this goes back to us trying to make this as simplistic as possible. And I won't right now on this board here. You see a lot of college football and NFL. So if you scroll down to where you're going to see some MLB plays available. Okay, so there's nothing currently. Um,
There it is.
Actually, or yeah, just a couple MLB plays. So essentially, what I want to do is, because the plays up top, most of those plays can be middle opportunities, and I don't know. Sorry if you want to get too like deep into that.
No,
Um,
can you explain what a middle opportunity is?
yeah, so the one kind of key feature with the Fantasy Optimizer tool is what we call a middle opportunity, um, if available, right? So what a middle opportunity is essentially, it's when you have, actually, if you could scroll up, mine, I can just kind of go off a real example from here.
Yep.
Scroll all the way to the top there. I think there we can use that. Okay, let's go with, yeah, we can do Caleb Williams here. So he his line, and currently we're on Underdog Fantasy. His line on Underdog Fantasy is under 305 and a half yards passing. So what we could see is on Prize Picks, that is 280 and a half, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the where the middle comes into play, right, is if I select the under 300 and a half, 305 and a half passing yards on Caleb Williams under on Underdog Fantasy, I would then go over to Prize Picks and select the over 280 and a half, right? And what I'm doing is now I have that would be a 25-yard middle, essentially, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if Caleb Williams hits anywhere from 280 and a half or 281 yards to to 305 yards, I'm going to win the under 305 and a half, and I'm going to win the over on PrizePicks, my over 281 and a half or 280 and a half.
Hold up.
Right.
Did you just guarantee a win? Is that like guaranteeing a win?
Yeah, so if he does actually hit both, if he hits, let's call it 290 yards, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would hit my over on
You
Prize
hit.
Picks, and I would hit my under on Underdog. So I would actually, yeah, it's incredible. Now I will
Yo,
say,
you just blew my mind.
yeah, no, it's incredible because the key with that is there's not many, I mean, again, too, college football is just coming out. These books aren't, nearly as sharp, not a lot of information on them. So maybe these middles are a little, what's the word? Kind of premature, right? You have 25-yard passing discrepancies. Like that's you're not going to see that quite often. But yeah, that is the case where you are trying to hit the middle, right? And if you do, I mean, you can profit a ton. It's middle opportunities are one of the most profitable kind of long-term endeavors.
Man,
That
I want to do a whole episode on middle opportunities. That is
Yeah,
so good. Nolan, I know you're busy and I don't want to hold you too long. I do have a couple more questions before we get out of here.
sure,
The
no
first
problem.
question is, if it was my first time ever and I was jumping on Underdog Fantasy, would you recommend that I just start out maybe with a two-man power play to start out?
So I wouldn't. So if let's say I'm a brand new to Underdog Fantasy, I would really try. I mean, we have, of course, on our YouTube channel, and sorry to kind of promote something else, but with OddsJam, we do have videos about our implied odds for Underdog Fantasy or any of our fantasy platforms. And so long term, what you'll see, and why I was so trying to drive the fact of getting the best implied odd would be because long term you can't win. You can't be profitable with a two-man power play.
Got it.
Um,
Got it.
I mean, and if you can, it's very, very, you just got extremely lucky for a short period of time. So that's why I always recommend for Underdog Fantasy specifically, again, a three-man non-insured, a four-man insured, or a five-man, and it doesn't matter whether it be insured or non-insured. And honestly, I would start with that so that I have the foundation of being a successful sports bettor, right off the bat, where I'm not I'm not learning initially with a two-man power play, losing money long term because you will, and then finally reeling it back and figuring out, oh hey, that's not the way I was supposed to go. So yeah, to be honest with you, knowing what I know now, absolutely. If I was a brand new sports bettor, I would really only start with, yeah, like I said, those three-man, four-man, or five-man. Um,
That's really good. So my last question is: are there any other parts of the OddsJam tool besides the Fantasy Optimizer that daily fantasy folks should pay attention to?
yeah, so I mean, the positive EV tool, of course, is another um, tool that you can use for fantasy purposes as well.
This right
Um,
here.
yep. So you go down there. Now with this is primarily geared for traditional sports books, right? You're going to see FanDuel and Caesars and all these traditional non-fantasy books. Now the way you could see fantasy books, if you like, is if you scroll up to the top, um, and then you go over to filters on the right side, and then go to sports books on the third one. Yep, perfect. And then press the toggle of select all. and then you can just select a couple of the fantasy sites that you like. And even there, you can see, for just example, the Underdog Fantasy 3 or 5 pick, right? That is put in there specifically for, um, so that it's a profitable play. You're getting the correct implied odd per leg. That's always something I wanted to put out there, because I think that's very smart that the engineers put that in there. So you already have an idea of what you're going off of. Um, Actually, yeah, so perfect. We could, sometimes you have to scroll through a few different fantasy sites to see some plays on here. But essentially, what this is it acts essentially as the fantasy optimizer. But it gives you, if you click, for instance, if you click the Sandy Alcantara line, just anywhere in, yep, and then scroll down a little bit. So it's going to show you books that we don't offer on the fantasy optimizer. So you see,
Aha.
yep, if you scroll a little bit, you can see tons of, Barstool is offering at -150, and I forget what was the positive EV play on this one. Was it the
Uh,
over or the under 5.5?
um,
Over.
over.
Okay. So you can see, actually, I mean, we can run through this real quick here. Is the reason why, this would be a profitable play, first and foremost, is we're seeing, if you scroll up there for a second, sorry. Okay, yeah. So the no vig odds on this play, since it's a given, a fixed payout, again, would be 119 or -119. And we could see too, if you scroll down again to the books. Sorry, a lot of scrolling back and forth.
All good. All
Um,
good.
you can really see, right, like the advantage that we have uh, with this play specifically on Prize Picks compared to all these other. Say, for example, and this is the whole thing about having multiple books, is, say I only had Barstool. Um, if I wanted to pick Sandy Alcantara, I could, but I'd be paying, $150 to profit 100 on his play, right? Which I would be losing out on, what would that be, nearly 31 cents of value between, Prize Picks implied odd and Barstool. And you can see across the board, I mean, it's a pretty heavy favorite for him to go over his 5.5 strikeouts. You can see all these books right around -150. Couple, I would say for the most part, yeah, -150 on the average odds. You can see 140-ish. But the point in saying that is you could see a kind of a overall view of what these books believe his line could be at, and us getting those implied odds right at -119. If we're getting a -150 average for a play, that should just tell us right off the bat, hey, that's a profitable play long term, and that's something I want to be putting in my slip. 5 or 6 man on Prize Picks. So
Love it. Man, you gave me so many nuggets, man. I'm so
thank you
grateful.
very much.
Anything you want to shout out for OddsJam before we get out of here?
Yeah, of course. Follow us on Twitter at OddsJam, I guess. And of course, too, DM me if you're ever interested in OddsJam. DM me at Nolan Dykes on Twitter, or at my email, nolan@oddsjam.com. I'm happy to answer any and all questions that I can. And yeah, I mean, really, our goal with OddsJam, myself, is we're just looking to help anybody we can out. If you're looking to be a long-term profitable sports bettor, you've come to the right place. And the first step is just learning, right? Watching these videos, soaking up information. And once you do that, I mean, and you see your first profitable month, and you know that your strategies that you have are working, it's a thrill. And yeah, man, I love it. Thank you for having me again. I appreciate that.
No, my pleasure. Sit tight for me, Nolan. I'm just going to close this out.
Absolutely.
Man, that was awesome, right? I told you we were going to bring you guys tons of value. If you're looking for a community that will help you win your league championship and win some DFS now, you got to join our private Discord server of over 1,200 fantasy sports fanatics. All you have to do is visit bit.ly/GamePick Podcast to sign up for free. Again, if you need help with DFS, with fantasy season long, just drop your questions below. We will respond to every single comment. And don't forget, play the waivers, set your lineups, and follow Game Pick, you frickin' fantasy nerd. Peace!